Hello and welcome to this exploring session as we return to the world of John Bale and his play King John. We started our journey in this the other day. We're going from midway through Act 1 for those who are following with a properly line numbered edition. We're going from around line 625, if that's of any help to you. We have got a little way into the narrative. We're going to go further into Act 1. We're going to finish Act 1, and then we're going to career with wanton abandon into the beginning of Act 2, even though we're not going to be coming back to Act 2 for several days. So hopefully we will not get confused by jumping over the interval as we're about to do. I did say the other day that we've got a date of around 1538 for this. Potentially it may have been written a few years earlier. John Bale loved making lists of the things he wrote, and it does feature in a slightly earlier list in 1536. But we have a confirmed performance date for this, or pretty much confirmed, in 1538, in September 1538. This play was performed in one of its early forms, and then it sort of gets adjusted and rewritten and has a slightly fiddly and complicated textual history, which we may get into when we come to the second half of the play, when there's an awful lot more rewriting going on in Bale's, potentially even Bale's own hand, as he carried this manuscript, this labour of love, around for 20 odd years. To gather our forces and go through this text, we have this team of readers, some who were here yesterday and some who are new to this play. So reading today, primarily Private Wealth will be.
Hello, I'm Francis Cox. I'm an actor living in sunny Amsterdam.
And taking a rest from King John, not technically the part that would double if this was a 5-actor company. Reading Dissimulation today is...
Heath Hill. I usually call myself an actor, but I'm fairly comprehensively out of work. Director and writer living in northeast London.
Reading today, first of our selections of Sedition. Reading Sedition for the first section, all change later on, will be...
I'm Scott Fairley. I'm an actor from Highland, Perthshire in Scotland.
Reading Sedition from the entrance of the Pope onwards, plus the interpreter is...
I am Greg, and I'm not a professional actor, and I am currently near Stratford-on-Avon.
And today, reading Civil Order will be...
Hello, it's Lynsey Beauchamp here, and I am currently self-isolating at home in Norfolk. And
finally, reading Clergy, Usurped Power, the Pope, possibly all of those all together at one at a time will be...
Hi, I'm Jitka Štollová, and I'm a junior research fellow in English literature at Trinity College, Cambridge.
And I'll be your host, Robert Crighton. And I would say I'm going to help interpret the stage directions and interpret what's going on. But the play already has an interpreter, so you don't need anyone to explain what's going on. It'll be fine. So, as I say, we are a reasonable percentage of the way into the play. King John has been getting more and more paranoid. I think it was our assessment yesterday, as the possibilities of sedition and undermining of his reign and his realm and the people and England itself, personified early in the play, is starting to come to a head. He has asked for an oath of loyalty, effectively, from the clergy and also nobility and civil order. Clergy does not seem to have been too honest in their oath-taking. But they're all promised to ignore sedition, which is a good cue point for sedition to come in. Enter sedition, please.
Have in once again, in spite of all my enemies, for they cannot drive me from all men's companies. And though it were so that all men would forsake me, yet doubt I it not, but some good women would take me. I look for fellows that here should make some sport. I marvel it is so long ere they hither resort. By the mass, I ween the knaves are in the briars, or else they have fallen into some order of friars. Nay, shall I guess right? They are gone into the stews. I hold ye my neck, anon, We shall hear news.
Indeed, we will hear something, because a voice is heard saying the litany.
List for God's passion. I trow here cometh some hog herd calling for his pigs. Such a noise I never heard.
And here come Dissimulation singing of the litany.
Sancte Dominice ora pro nobis.
Sancte Pildmonicae I bestrau vobis.
Sancte Francis ora pro nobis.
Hear ye not? Cock's soul, what meaneth this hypocrite knave?
Paternosia, I pray God bring him soon to his grave, quiesced in shells with a vengeful sanctificator, or else Holy Church shall never thrive by St. Peter.
Tell me, good fellow, makest thou this prayer for me?
Are as fierce as though you broke your nose at the buttery. I meddle not with thee, but here to good saints I pray, against such enemies as will Holy Church decay. Johanne regen equo liberanos Domine.
Leave, I say, all by mass. I will make you groan.
If thou be gentle, I pray thee, let me alone, for within a while my devotion will be gone.
And wherefore dost thou pray here so bitterly, mumbling thy paternoster and chanting the litany?
That Holy Church might save her patrimony, and to have of King John a triumphant victory.
And why of King John? Doth he vex you so sore?
Both churches and abbeys he oppresseth more, and take of the clergy it is unreasonable to tell.
Out with the Pope's bulls then, and curse him down to hell.
Hush, man, we have done so, but all will not help. He regardeth no more the Pope than he doth a whelp.
Well, let him alone. For that will I give him a scalp. But what art thou called of thine own monkish nation?
Keep it in council. Dame David Dissimulation.
What dissimulation? Cock's soul, mine old acquaintance. Parmi fait, mon ami. Je suis tout at votre plaisance.
Mercy's good friend with all my very heart. I trust we shall talk more freely or we depart.
Why, villain whoreson, knowest not thy cousin's sedition?
I have ever loved both thee and thy condition.
Thou must needs, I trow, for we come of two brethren. If thou remember, our fathers were one man's children. Thou comest of falsehood, and I of privy treason.
Infidelity our grandfather is, by reason.
Marry, that is true, and his beginner Antichrist, the great Pope of Rome, or first vain popish priest.
How welcome, cousin, by the way that my soul shall to.
Gramercy, cousin, by the holy Bishop Benno, thou keepest thy old wont, thou art still an abbey man.
To hold all things up, I play my part now and then.
Why, what manner of office hast thou within the abbey?
Of all religions I keep the church door key.
Then of a likelihood thou art their general porter.
Nay, of monks and canons I am the subtle sorter. While some talk with Bess, the residue keep silent. Though we play the knaves, we must know a good pretence. Wheresoever some eat, a certain keep the freuter. Wheresoever some sleep, some must needs keep the daughter. Didst thou never know the manner of our sense?
I was never with them acquainted, by Saint Denis.
Then never knewest thou the knavery of our means. If I should tell all, I could say more than that.
Now, of good fellowship, I beseech thee, show me what.
A profitable lucre cometh ever in by me.
But by what mean? Tell me, I heartily pray thee.
To win the people, I appoint each man his place, some to sing Latin, and some to duck at grace, some to go mumming, and some to bear the cross, some to stoop downward as their heads were stopped with moss, some read the epistle and gospel and high mass, some sing at the lectern with long ears like an ass. The pavement of the church the ancient fathers treads, some with a portas, sometime with a pair of beads, and this exceedingly draweth the people to devotion, especially when they do see so good religion. Then have we images of St. Spirit and St. Saviour, much is the seeking of them to get their favour. Young women barefoot and old men seek them breechless. The miracles wrought there I can in no wise express. We lack neither gold nor silver, girdles nor rings, candles nor tapers, nor other customed offerings. Though I seem a sheep, I can play the subtle fox. I can make Latin to bring this gear to the box. Tush! Latin is alone to bring such matter to pass. There is no English that can such sleights compass. And therefore we will No service to be sung, gospel nor epistle, but all in Latin tongue. Of our subtle drifts, many more points are behind. I told you all we should never have an end.
In nomine Patris, of all that ever I heard, thou art alone yet of such a dreaming buzzard.
Hey, dost thou not see how I in my colours jet? To blind the people I have a yet farther fet. This is for Bernard, this is for Bennett, this is for Gilbert, and this is for Janet, for Francis this is, and this is for Dominic, for Austin and Ellen, and this for St. Patrick. We have so many rules, but never one we keep. When we sing full loud, our hearts be fast asleep. We resemble saints in grey, white, black, and blue, yet unto princes not one of our number true. And that shall King John prove shortly by the rule.
But in the meantime, yourselves get little good. Your abbeys go down, I hear say, everywhere.
Yea, friend Sedition, thou must see to that care.
Then must I have help by sweet St. Benet's cup.
Thou shalt have a child of mine own bringing up.
Of thy bringing up? Cock's soul, what knave is that?
Marry, private wealth. Now have I told thee what? I made him a monk and a perfect cloisterer, and in the abbey he began first cellarer, then prior, then abbot of 1,000-pound land, no worse. Now he's a bishop, and rideth with 100 horse, and as I hear say, he is like to be a cardinal.
Is he so indeed? By the mass, then have it all.
Nay, first private wealth shall bring in usurped power with his authority, and then the game is o'er.
Tush, usurped power doth favour me of all men, for in his troubles I ease his heart now and then. When princes rebel against his authority, I make their commons against them for to be. 20,000 men are but a morning breakfast to be slain for him, he taking his repast.
Thou hast, I perceive, a very subtle cast.
I am for the Pope, as for the ship the mast.
Sedition, I may still in England be. King John hath threatened that I shall oversee.
Well, if thou wilt of me have remedy this o'er, go seek private wealth and also usurped power.
I can bring but one, by Mary Jesus' mother.
Bring thou in the one, and let him bring in the other.
And we'll just pause there before we add some additional characters. That moves on at a fair old lick. It's got a real bounce to it, I felt. I mean, it helps. It opens with some music. Bale just like to mix his music in. And then we get straight into abusing the church, because that's what the play is all about. It's interesting. I don't know whether that's part of the logic of this, is that time is moving fast. So Dissimulation coming in and saying, you should curse him and, curse him down to hell, and sort of, well, we've already done that. And I'm just wondering whether that's sort of the historical time moving on and being excommunicated, whether that's what's happening here or whether that's coming up later on in the play. It's that sense of building tensions against poor King John. I wonder whether Sedition slipping into French signifies anything. I don't know. I genuinely don't. And setting up, of course, the entrance of more unseemly characters at the end. Thoughts about what's going on here?
That long list from Dissimulation, very much like that enormous list of monastic orders that Jitka had yesterday. And I wonder, I notice it's not in square brackets, but I wonder if he wrote that in later, because the verse style has become more Gilbert and Sullivan again.
I think it's more a character thing. I think it's because that character is perhaps just more fun. By its nature, you're allowed to be openly villainous, so I think that might be an element to it. I don't think it comes from any later. The first half is left seems to be relatively unadjusted. It's interesting. I always find it interesting with comparing this with John Hayward, who is a good Catholic soul from writing slightly earlier than this, who is again also writing about the problems of abuses of the clergy and excess, but because he's a Catholic, he's doing it in a much lighter tone. But there's elements of this which would not be completely out of place in that, and you know, that kind of it is a bit of a commonplace. Some of the suggestions that everyone goes a little too far with their bulls and their saints, and you know, maybe we just should trim some of the edges off. I find interesting.
It's also suggestive of a little bit more social relaxation than I thought was typical of the 16th century. We actually have a parody of the church liturgy on stage, very close to a cock and balls joke. You know, not too many years in the future, all that sort of thing becomes illegal.
Yes, and to some degree, Bale is sort of part of the reason why. To some degree, it's a response to this level of excess. That might be overstating it a bit, but he's part of the problem. Other thoughts from the room? How are you finding Sedition, sir?
It's sort of reminding me more of Magnificence, actually, than Three Laws, which is obviously the other John Bale one that I did. Yeah, he kind of seems... I wondered whether there was going to be a beating up scene there when the two met, sort of a la all those other plays that we've looked at where the two vices go to town on one another. But he seems a bit sort of classier than them. But yeah, the rhythm, I really like the rhythm of it, the kind of the to and fro that they have. Yeah, it's I was sort of expecting more like Three Laws, and it's not. It almost seems like a different author to me. It's far less sodomy than there was last time.
There is that we have had no sodomy so far. There's still time. There's still time. Okay. Any additional thoughts before we go into the rest of the scene or continuation of the scene? No. Okay. Let's go in. So here we have the additional people that they've mentioned because they need more vices to assist them. So income, usurped power, and private wealth, singing one after another.
Super feumina Babylone suspendimus organa nostra.
Quomodo cantabimus canticum bona in terra alinea.
By the mass, methink they are singing of placebo.
Peace! For with my spectacles vadam et vidibo, Cox, soul it is they. At last I have smelled them out.
Here, go and bring them presumably forward, and they all meet together.
Thou mayest be a sow if thou hast so good a snout. Sirs, mark well this gear, for now it beginneth to work. False dissimulation doth bring in private wealth, and usurped power, which is more fierce than a lurk, cometh in by him to decay all spiritual health. Then I by them both, as clear experience tell, we four by our crafts King John will so subdue, that for 300 years all England shall it rue.
The clergy, friends, report like as ye see, that their private wealth come ever in by me.
But by who comest thou? By the mass, even by the devil, for the ground thou art of the Christian people's evil.
What are you, sir? I pray you say good by me.
By my troth, I come by thee and thy affinity.
Etch thou in thy fellows as fast as ever thou can.
I trow thou shalt see me now play the pretty man. Of me private wealth came first usurped power. Ye may perceive it in pageant here this hour.
Now welcome, fellows, by all these bones and nails.
Among companions, good fellowship never fails.
Nay, usurped power, thou must go back again, for I must also put thee to a little pain.
Why, fellow Sedition, what wilt thou do to me?
To bear me on thy back, and bring me in also, that it may be said that first dissimulation brought in private wealth to every Christian nation, and that private wealth brought in usurped power, and he sedition in city, town, and tower, that some man may know the fetch of all our sort.
Come on thy ways then. that thou mayst make thee fall.
Nay, usurped power, we shall bear him all three. Thyself, he and I, if ye'll be ruled by me, for there is none of us but in him hath the stroke.
The whoreson knave weigheth, and it were a crooked oak.
And here they shall bear him in.
Yea, thus it should be. Marry, now I am aloft. I will beshite you all if you set me not down soft. In my opinion, by sweet St. Anthony, here is now gathered a full honest company. Here is neither Austin, Ambrose, Jerome, nor Gregory, but here is a sort of companions, much more merry. They of the church then were 4 holy doctors. We of the church now are the 4 general proctors. Here is, first of all, good Father Dissimulation, the first beginner of this same congregation. Here is private wealth, which has the church infect with all abusions and brought it to a sin sect. Here is usurped power that all kings doth subdue with such authority as is neither good nor true. And I, last of all, am even Sanchez per Sedition.
Under heaven is not a more knave in condition. Whereas thou dost come, that commonwealth cannot thrive. By our Lord, I marvel that thou art yet alive.
Where herbs are plucked up, the weeds many times remain.
No man can utter an evidence more plain.
Yea, ye think so, you? Now God's blessing break your head. I can do but laugh to hear you by this bread. I am so merry that we are met by St. John. I feel not the ground that I do go upon. For the love of God, let us have some merry song.
Begin thyself then, and we shall leap in among.
And we have a song of which we don't know what it is, but presumably it's one that everybody's going to know. Everybody gets a chance to sing along, maybe even the audience as well. Isn't it always nice to sing along with the forces of darkness? Song ends.
I would ever dwell here to have such merry sport.
Thou mayst have it, man, if thou wilt hither resort, for the Holy Father is as good a fellow as we.
Holy Father, why pray thee, which is he?
Usurped power here, which, though he apparent be in this apparel, yet hath he authority both in heaven and earth, in purgatory and in hell.
Mark well his sayings, for a true tale he doth tell.
What, usurp power? Cock's soul, you are our Pope? Where is your 3 crowns, your cross keys, and your cope? What meaneth this matter? Methink you walk astray.
Thou knowest, I must have some dalliance and play, for I am a man, like as another is. Sometime I must hunt, sometime I must Alison kiss. I am bold of you, I take you for no strangers. We are as spiritual, I doubt in you no dangers.
I ought to consider your holy fatherhood. From my first infancy you have been to me so good. For God's sake, wit save to give me your blessing here, a pena et culpa, that I may stand this day clear.
And there's a kneels as a stage direction there.
From making cuckolds, marry, that were no merry cheer.
A pena et culpa, I trow thou canst not hear.
Yea, with the cuckold's wife ye have drunk double beer.
Pray thee, Sedition, my patience no more steer. A pena et culpa, I desire to be clear, and then all the devils of hell I would not fear.
But tell me one thing, dost thou not preach the gospel?
Oh, I promise you, I defy it to the devil of hell.
If I knew thou didst, thou shouldst have none absolution.
If I do, abjure me or put me to execution.
I dare say he breaketh no popish constitution.
Such men are worthy to have our contribution. I assoil thee here, behind and also before. Now art thou as clear as that day thou wert born. Rise, Dissimulation, and stand up like a bold knight. Doubt not of my power, though my apparel be light.
A man, by the mass, cannot know you from a knave. You look so like him as I would God should me save.
Thou art very lewd, our father, so to deprave, though he, for his pleasure, such light apparel have. It is now summer, and the heat is without measure, and among us he may go light at his own pleasure. Fellow Sedition, though thou dost mock and scoff, we have other matters than this to be commoned of. Friend Dissimulation, what dost thou not thy massage and show out of England the cause of thy far passage? Tush, blush, blemish not, poor son, for I shall ever assist thee.
I'm just going to pause there. We will pick up on this because we're going into a slightly different plot point of this banter. Yeah, there's a few choice lines in that made me sort of just do mini double takes. There's some really interesting questions there. So the stage direction is not very clear actually when they say they shall bear him. So it's like they're carrying him aloft. And the next line makes it much clearer. And carrying him aloft, what's the first thing he says? I will beshit you all if you set me not down soft. It's just, it's an interesting sort of just image of carrying him aloft, and he's the leader of them all. And then, also the dissimulation, kneeling, and wanting to get blessed, as it were, and being interrogated there, and the way that pans out as well. Because how does the blessing occur? With the line "I assoil thee here behind and also before," is that just a very unfortunate word usage, or am I? How scurrilous is this going?
Well, the word assoil kind of pairs with Bashichi or Bashichi, which comes earlier.
It's just are we going with a kissing the arse of Satan kind of deal that we've had in very different contexts?
It seems to be a perversion of the word absolve. That is the sacrament which usurped wealth is supposedly granted.
Yeah. Right. It's like a mock absolution from the Pope, isn't it?
Yeah. And I wonder if it's a deliberate malapropism, for want of a better word, or whether it's a form of the word that's gone out of use.
Well, that was the question. Is it going, pushing it the boundaries as far as it can, or is it just simply a slightly odd word choice? Because Bale is, he's known for these slightly odd word choices occasionally. Anyone want to go either way and not opinion there?
Isn't there some stuff coming up shortly about how dost thou prove me that his arse is holy now, for it hath a hole? So it would not be out of keeping for it to kind of be going down the whole.
Yeah.
I mean,
route.
Yeah. Wouldn't pull it past Bale. Really wouldn't pull it past Bale. I mean, that's the level we're playing at here. I mean,
it came across as very sort of like music hall, that whole bit of sort of being like lifted up and carted around, and then the jolly old knees up with everyone joining in with and then this sort of parody of a church service sort of feels like proper sort of music hall circusy kind of.
Yeah, I want to know what the song is, because that makes such a difference to this scene. What do these people sing?
The devil. Sorry.
Lynsey, I think you were almost saying something earlier, but then maybe you changed your mind. Wisely.
No, I was really just going to pick up on the point that Keith was talking about, which is it's a kind of a mock absolution, a kind of a, I'm trying to imagine the staging of it. Dissimulation is on his knees. Usurped Power has just said, well, even though I'm, dressed for summer, that's because of the time of year, but I have the full authority, and so I'm just trying to imagine, back from my Catholic confession and absolution days, what it would be in terms of that. and trying to imagine it really. But I think a soil is, you know, as Keith was saying, it's like absolve, but not. And I think I've never come across that word before, so I can't help thinking it's absolutely deliberate, that it's a slight rhyme, but not a full rhyme. So.
It is an interesting question, you know, it's a piece of religious propaganda, how far Bale thought he could go, you know, at this time. Yeah. You know, depending on which audience he was playing to as well. You know, he's pushing the boat out a bit. There's that really pointed line about, you know, you're running out of monasteries at one point, which, you know, isn't within the context of the play. That's clearly the context of the time it's being performed in, right in the middle of the heart of the disillusionment. Just going, yeah, how are we doing for them? Oh no, next week they're all gone. So he's really laying it on thick as usual. Any other thoughts?
I've just looked up a soil. It does share a root with Latin absolvere, so it does have the meaning to absolve, acquit. So whether it is a deliberate pun, because there are two different etymologies of it. It's two different verbs. One meaning to soil or stain or to make dirty, and one meaning to absolve. So if that is true, in terms of etymology, he's being exceptionally clever by doing that quibble and having his cake and eating it. If someone said, why did you put that in?
Yeah, the glossary I'm looking at is saying that it's just absolve, but I don't believe it. Okay, I'm going to ask us just to back up a couple of lines, private wealth, before we go for, unless anyone has any additional stuff, just to go from the last three lines of where you've been saying, so friend dissimulation, because that's where we effectively move into the next bit of business, shall we say. We've done the parody stuff, let's get back to the plot, perhaps.
Yeah. Friend dissimulation, why dost thou not thy massage and show out of England the cause of thy far passage? Tush, blemish not, poor son, for I shall ever assist thee.
The knave is white-livered by the Holy Trinity.
Why so, private wealth? What is the matter? Tell me.
Dissimulation is a messenger for the clergy. I must speak for him. There is no remedy. The clergy of England, which is your special friend, and of a long time hath borne you very good mind, filling your coffers with many 1,000 pound. If ye not set to hand, he is like to fall to the ground. I do promise you truly, his heart is in his hose. King John so useth him, that he reckoneth all to lose.
Tell, dissimulation, why art thou so ashamed to show thy message? Thou art much to be blamed. Let me see those writings, tush, man. I pray thee, come near.
Your horrible holiness puts me in wonderful fear.
Tush, let me see them, I pray thee heartily.
And here dissimulation shall deliver the writings to usurped power.
I perceive it well, thou wilt lose no ceremony.
Yet is he no less than a false knave, verily. I would thou hadst kissed his arse, for that is holy.
How dost thou prove me that his arse is holy now?
For it hath an hole, even fit for the nose of you.
Your part is not else but for to play the knave, and so ye must still continue to your grave.
I say, leave your gauze and attend to me this hour. The bishops writeth here to me, usurped power, desiring assistance of mine authority to save and support the church's liberty. They report King John to them to be very hard, and to have the church in no price nor regard. In his parliament he demandeth of the clergy for his wars 1/10 of the church's patrimony.
He will not consent to that, I trow, by St. Mary.
No, draw to you still, but let none from you carry.
You know it is clean against our holy decrees that princes should thus condemn our liberties. he taketh upon him to reform the tithes and offerings, and intermeddleth with our other spiritual things.
Ye must sequester him, or else that will mar all.
Nay, besides all this, before judges temporal, he conveneth clerks of causes criminal.
If ye see not to that, the church will have a fall.
By the mass, then priests are like to have a pang. For treason, murder, and theft they are like to hang. By cock's soul, then I am like to walk for treason. If I be taken, look to it, therefore in season.
Marry, God forbid that ever your holy anointed for treason or theft should be hanged, racked, or jointed, like the rascal sort of the profane laity.
Nay, I shall otherwise look to it. You may trust me. Before himself also the bishops he doth convent, to the derogation of their dignity excellent, and will suffer none to the court of Rome to appeal.
No, he condemneth your authority and seal, and saith in his land he will be lord and king. No priest so hardy to enterprise anything. For the which, of late, with him were at variance 4 of the bishops, and in manner of defiance, William of London and Eustace Bishop of Ely, Walter of Winchester, Giles of Hertford truly, by your authority they have him excommunicate.
Then have they done well, for he is a reprobate. To that I admit he is always contrary. I made this fellow here the Bishop of Canterbury?
Should be Canterbury.
Canterbury, and he will agree, thereto in no condition.
Then hath he knowledge that his name is Sedition?
Doubtless he hath so, and that drowneth his opinion.
Why do ye not say his name is Stephen Langton?
Tush, we have done so, but that helpeth not the matter. The Bishop of Norwich for that cause doth him flatter.
Stick thou to it fast, we have once admitted thee.
I will not one jot from my admission flee. The best of them all shall know that I am he. Nay, in such matters let men beware of me.
The monks of Canterbury did more at my request than they would at his concerning that election. They chased Sedition, as it is now manifest, in spite of his heart. Then he, for their rebellion, exiled them all, and took their whole possession into his own hands, them sending oversea their livings to seek in extreme poverty. This custom also he hath, as it is told me. When prelates depart ye, bishop, abbot, or curate, he entereth their lands without my liberty, taking the profits till the next be consecrate, institute, stalled, induct, or inthronized. And of the pied monks he intendeth to take a dime. All will be mad if I look not to it in time.
It is taken, sir. The sum is unreasonable, a 9,000 mark to live they are not able. His suggestion was to subdue the Irishmen.
Yea, that same people doth ease the church now and then. For that enterprise they would be looked upon.
They get no money, but they shall have clean remission. For those Irishmen are ever good to the church. When kings disobey it, they will begin to worch.
And all that they do is for indulgence and pardon.
By the mass, and that is not worth a rotten warden.
What care we for that? To them it is venison.
Then let them have it, a God's dear benison.
Now, how shall we do for this same wicked king?
Suspend him and curse him, both with your word and writing. If that will not help, then interdict his land with extreme cruelness, and if that will not stand, cause other princes to revenge the church's wrong. It will profit you to set them a work among. For clean remission, one king will subdue another. Yea, the child sometime will slay both father and mother.
This counsel is good. I will now follow it plain. Tarry thou still here till we return again.
And now there's going to be some action, which we'll get to in just a moment. So, he does deliver a sort of the cardinal sin earlier. You mentioned earlier, Alex, the I would thou had kissed his ass, for that is holy. I mean, it's bad enough he does the joke. He then explains the joke, which is unforgivable. It's one thing to do a bad joke; it's another thing then to painstakingly and laboriously explain it 2 lines later.
The really stupid people in the audience.
No, there's no excuse. If they don't get it, you move on. I'm sorry. I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed. and then immediately Usurped Power just says, "Oi, shush, plot. I've got some plot to read out." So the whole scene is moving towards in the interdiction. So how did we find the journey of Usurped Power and everyone? How was that for you?
Less than straightforward.
Yes. Yeah.
It's beginning to get slightly into you had to be there, really, territory.
Yeah.
Because how much of this stuff his audience would have known and recognised? Can anybody remember in the 1500s who Stephen Langton was?
I'm assuming that he was a name that was familiar. I'm going to make that call. The others, I think we can say no. The other random bishops, but I'm suspecting because of where we're going in the narrative that he must be a name that rings at least a faint bell with everyone. He's going to be a person we all concern ourselves with. But I don't know. You're absolutely right. It does seem to get a little bogged down in details a bit. Any other thoughts? I mean, the narrative thrust that we had yesterday is slightly, but it might be because we're doing a different session, and we've our pacing has changed slightly, and things. Is it just because there's so many evil people in the room, you just don't know who to follow?
Yeah.
That 2-hander at the beginning was really quite bouncy, and now it's sort of got and I think there's also physical business probably going on here that keeps it a bit more up in the air.
It's that I'm slightly struggling on keeping the hand on who's got the status at any one minute, which I think might be clear in terms of if you're staging it, who gets to stand where and interact with who, because it's sort of different people seem to grab the status at any one point. Particularly because we have previously had that relationship of Sedition being there and Dissimulation coming in and then bringing the other two in, and then it seems to sort of develop into something else. And
as Usurped Power is basically has been called the Pope in his off day clothes. He's going to get changed in a minute and be properly the Pope. But there's interesting things about talking about private wealth and about really hammering the point about private wealth and how corrupting it is, and it comes across as the players being a bit socialist at one point. It's a bit early for that.
Yes.
Any more?
I'm not sure if this came up in the afternoon session or the prior session on this, but he says his suggestion was to subdue the Irishmen. I just sort of thought that suddenly seemed like quite left fieldy, as in where did that come from? Did I miss something?
No, you're absolutely right. It's very left field.
I just thought, are they going to go anywhere with this, or what?
Well, it's a question of who's spending money on what expensive venture, and it wasn't. I didn't immediately follow precisely where that was going. Did anyone get a stronger handle on that?
Well, I think the idea is that the clergy resent being taxed to pay for an Irish war. Since the Irish are such good supporters of the clergy. I think that's the idea. I mean, it's odd because kings have repeatedly indulged in mass confiscations in order to pay for Irish wars. Richard II does it, much to everybody's annoyance. It seems to be a running thing. And this is written by somebody who'd been a bishop in Ireland.
Not quite yet. That is yet to come.
Right.
Well, depending on which draft we're talking about, and we'll get into there's some interesting biographical crossovers when we get to the second half. Well, it's interesting because we had nobility in the last session talking about wasting money and clergy, and they were talking about wasting money about foreign wars in France.
Yes.
So it's a general thing. Why should we be taxed for this other stuff happening? So it feels like it's one of those historical details. Presumably John was planning on doing some sort of expedition, with which I can't remember. It's John, who cares?
There is, I'm sorry, I've just done a sort of hasty search to dredge up who Stephen Langton was. The nearest I can get to it is something that some weird document in Google Documents. Stephen Langton, being chosen archbishop by a few monks at the court of Rome, as before mentioned, was consecrated by the Pope himself at Viterbo in 1207. He was descended from an ancient family in Leicestershire, brought up at the University of Paris, where he was greatly esteemed by the king and of France, blah, blah, blah. So,
yeah. So he's a historical figure who, by having sedition effectively taking on his mantle, has a resonance that works. Whether anyone today or even then knew, I don't know.
I was going to say that's a fair while back from when it was being performed, wasn't it? In terms of...
So I don't know what chronicles or what sources might be available that early. I know where we are by the end of the century, but I don't really know where we are in the 1530s. Anyway. Having flagged that issue up, any additional thoughts before we move on into the interdiction? Shall we do some interdicting? Let's do that. So we have quite a complicated stage directions start occurring now. So I'm just going to compare my versions. So here goes out usurped power and private wealth and sedition. While you're off stage, people. Usurped power shall dress for the Pope, so you're going to change out your Pope shorts and put on your proper Pope's gear. Private wealth will change into a cardinal, and sedition shall for a monk. A monk effectively being as Stephen Langton. So the cardinal shall bring in the cross, and Stephen Langton the book, bell and candle.
And meanwhile, dissimulation goes into the front of tabs number.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
This usurped power, which is now gone from hence, for the Holy Church will make such ordinance that all men shall be under his obedience, yea, kings will be glad to give him their allegiance. And then shall we priests live here without disturbance, as God's own vicar anon ye shall see him sit, his flock to advance by his most politic wit. He shall make prelates, both bishop and cardinal, doctors and prebends with furred hoods and side gowns. He will also create the orders monastical, monks, canons and friars with grey coats and shaven crowns, and build them places to corrupt cities and towns. The dead saints shall show both visions and miracles, with images and relics he shall work stericals. He will make matins, hours, mass and evensong, and to drown the scriptures for doubt of heresy. He will send pardons to save men's souls among Latin devotions with the Holy Rosary. He will appoint fastings and pluck down matrimony. Holy water and bread shall drive away the devil. Blessings with black beads will help in every evil. King John of England, because he hath rebelled against Holy Church, using it worse than a stable, to give up his crown shall shortly be compelled. And the Albigenes, like heretics detestable, shall be brent because against our father they babble. Though Dominic's preaching, through Dominic's teaching, 18,000 are slain, to teach them how they shall Holy Church disdain. All this to perform, he will cause a general council of Christendom to the Church of Latinency. His intent shall be for to suppress the gospel, Yet he will gloze it with very good pretence to subdue the Turks by a Christian violence. Under this colour he shall ground there many things which will at the last be Christian men's undoings. The Pope's power shall be above the powers all. An ear confession, a matter necessary. Ceremonies will be the rites ecclesiastical. He shall set up there both pardons and purgatory. The gospel preaching will be an heresy. By this provision and by such other kinds, we shall be full sure always to have our minds.
And just to note, during that speech, there was a lengthy section which had been added later, possibly because he realised the costume changes were just too elaborate and they needed another couple of minutes. But maybe not. It may just have felt it. Anyway, so at this point, Usurped Power returns to the stage as the Pope, Private Wealth as Cardinal, and Sedition as Stephen Langton.
Ah, you are a blab. I perceive you will tell all. I left ye not here to be so liberal.
Mea culpa,
There's a nailing and knocking on the breast as you say this.
culpa, mea culpa, gravissima mea culpa. Give me your blessing, pro Deo et Sancta Maria.
Thou hast my blessing. Arise now and stand aside.
The skin is so thick it will not through glide.
Let us go about our other matters now.
Any of you would like to jump in? That's the Dissimulation do it. This is all three of them speaking, but just go for it.
We wait here upon the great holiness of you.
Forasmuch as King John doth Holy Church so handle, here I do curse him with my cross, book, bell, and candle. Like as the same root turneth now from me his face, so God I require to sequester him of his grace. As this book doth spare by my work manual, I will God to close up from him his benefits all. As this burning flame goeth from this candle inside, I will God to put him from his eternal light. I take him from Christ, and after the sound of this bell, both body and soul I give him to the devil of hell. I take him from baptism, with the other sacraments and suffrages of the Church, both Ember Days and Lents. Here I take from him both penance and confession, Mass of the 5 wounds with censing and procession. Here I take from his holy water and holy bread, and never will them to stand him in any stead. This thing to publish I constitute you 3, giving you my power and my full authority.
And they all three then say, give it a go all together now.
With the grace of God, we shall perform it then.
Then get you forward, so fast as ever ye can, upon a bon voyage. Yet let us sing merrily.
Then begin the song, and we shall follow gladly.
And here they shall sing again, who knows what.
To colour this thing, thou shalt be called Pandulphus. Thou, Stephen Langton, thy name shall be Raymundus. First thou, Pandulphus, shall openly him suspend with book, bell, and candle. If he will not so amend, interdict his land, and the churches all upsphere.
I have my message, to do it I will not fear.
And here he goes out to dress for nobility.
And thou, Stephen Langton, command the bishops all, so many to curse as are to him beneficial, dukes, earls, and lords, whereby they may forsake him.
Sir, I will do it, and that I trow shall shake him.
Exit Sedition.
Raymundus, Go thou forth to the Christian princes all. Bid them, in my name, that they upon him fall, both with fire and sword, that the church may him conquer.
Your pleasure I will no longer time defer.
Say this to them also. Pope Innocent III remission of sins to so many men hath granted, as will do their best to slay him, if they may.
Sir, it shall be done without any longer delay.
Exit dissimulation.
In the mean season, I shall such gear advance as will be to us a perpetual furtherance. First, ear confessions, then pardons, then purgatory. Saints worshipping then seeking of imagery, then Latin service with the ceremonies many, whereby our bishops and abbots shall get money. I will make a law to burn all heretics, and kings to depose when they are schismatics. I will also raise up the 4 begging orders, that they may preach lies in all the Christian borders. For this and other, I will call a general council to ratify them in like strength with the gospel.
And here the Pope goes out, and the interpreter's speech that we have here as the end of an act has been added in later. And because we had the stage direction earlier saying go out and dress for nobility, I suspect that the earliest incarnation of this was run straight through, that there wasn't necessarily a break here. So, however, as we've got the interpreter, let's hear what the interpreter has to say before an interval.
In this present act, we have to you declared, as in a mirror, the beginning of Saint King John, how he was of God a magistrate appointed to the governance of the same noble region, to see maintain the true faith and religion. But Satan the devil, which that time was at large, had so great a sway that he could it not discharge. Upon a good zeal he attempted very far for wealth of this realm to provide reformation in the church thereof. But they did him debar that good purpose, for by excommunication the space of 7 years they interdict this nation. These bloodsuppers thus of cruelty and spite subdued this good king for executing right. In the second act, this will appear more plain, wherein Pandolphus shall him excommunicate within this his land and depose him from his reign. All other princes they shall move him to hate and to persecute after most cruel rate. They will him poison in their malignity and cause ill report of him always to be. This noble King John, as a faithful Moses, withstood proud Pharaoh for his poor Israel, minding to bring it out of his land of darkness, but the Egyptians did against him so rebel that his poor people did still in the desert dwell, till that Duke Josue, which was our late King Henry, clearly brought us into the land of milk and honey. As a strong David at the voice of verity, great Gole, the Pope, he strake down with his sling, restoring again to a Christian liberty his land and people like a most victorious king. To her first beauty intending the church to bring from ceremonies dead to the living word of the Lord, this the second act will plenteously record.
And we'll just pause there. I mean, it's interesting because we were talking about earlier about, would we know who Stephen Langton is? Would we know who Pandolphus is? Well, maybe after the first performances, some people went, who? And it feels like that this little bit here is actually like, okay, for those of you who don't know the history, let me just give you a little précis. Just to repeat what's happened. Here it was. And really then emphasize, that King John got a bad report. This really is an attempt to reframe him as noble, and also this dates this speech as well quite firmly because it says late King Henry, so it's definitely not from its original inception. I added the little bells in there. It's not an original idea. I nicked that from a radio version from the 50s. But it gives it an additional little bit of weight and makes it a ceremony and makes it so I think for the dramatic purposes, it makes it have that sort of horror of this kind of ceremony that Bale was probably trying to get across. I don't know whether that's fair or whether I've, by doing that, I changed the tone and the tenor of things, but whether it could be much more comic or over the top or what? Thoughts?
I don't think it was over the top because what happens there is the full ceremony of excommunication, and in fact it bears fairly close resemblance to putting out ghosts and devils, the actual ceremony of exorcism. And it comes after this recital of the involvement of Dominic and the putting down of the Albigensians. St. Dominic's approximately the contemporary of King John. The order that is set up under his rule supplies about half the inquisitors, the other half coming mainly from the Franciscans, because bishops couldn't be trusted to conduct inquisitions within their own diocese. So they're a sort of central spiritual police force. Which is one of the things actually probably that John was objecting to in his reform. So a huge crushing inhuman machine. I suspect comic effect goes out of the window here.
Well, it's also interesting. The moment the Pope comes in full popish regalia, dissimulation, down on the knees, doing the full works. There's no mucking about with ceremony here, as we had earlier. This is the real deal. It's quite disturbing. It really is. Especially coming from a modern perspective, we're going, not very nice. Any additional thoughts?
I really like. I'm sorry.
No. Alex first.
It's just interesting hearing King John called noble, because pop culturally he's so kind of, whether it's Disney or A.A. Milne, he's kind of the phony King of England and not a nice person. It's really interesting seeing him essentially compared to Moses, which again sort of set up a resonance with the three laws of the Mosaic law then being replaced by Jesus or whatever that law was, I can't remember. And it sort of almost seemed to make a subliminal equation between he was the sort of avatar, the precursor to good King Henry, who then came in and led us to the land of milk and honey, seemed quite sort of explicit at the end. Yeah, and also just weird having a narrator kind of going for you really thick people. This is what you've seen, and for anyone that's falling asleep, this is what you're going to say. As a modern audience, I just find so bizarre.
Which the thing is, there might not be an interval. The way the interpreter speaks as well comes in. It's like we're just giving everyone a moment, shift in your seats, wiggle around a bit, because the second act, it's like, there isn't actually a break. It's quite odd that way. I find that interesting.
How long would the play? How long does the play actually run at 73 pages?
It's 26,000 words, so it could be 2.5. It could be 3 hours, depending on how you play it. That's a lot of words.
One needed a toilet break in.
I think they'd just walk out. I mean, selective inattention.
Right.
So, and again, it depends on the performance space as well. If it's out and about or even outside. Which is possible as well. It might be more scope for that. So, Jitka.
I really enjoyed the character of Pope. It felt when we were discussing slightly blurred hierarchies in the previous bit. This is where you really feel the power when you're the Pope. I love the way he comes into the play. Dismissing dissimulation and just for speaking too much, for doing theatre, basically. You're a blab. But it feels that this play almost has elements of certain anger towards theatre. It is a bit anti-theatrical whilst also being quite theatrical. It's hard to pin down, but the way the artifacts are presented, it's very much drawing attention to props, and we had the very forceful changing costumes we have here. Previously, at least yesterday, we had goodies and beddies. Everyone had their go at each. Now it's just costumes add layers and layers of corruptedness in the world, and it just reminded me of one line we had yesterday, which speaks about friars being bad towards widows. Their inside coats are wandering like most disguised players, which is exactly what the people performing this would have been doing, basically. So yeah, it has a bit of the pre-puritanical attitude almost. At least it sounds to me.
Yeah, I mean, it is that thing that Bale is full of contradictions, and that early evangelical Protestantism where you're not quite sure which way it's going to go or who's following what. I mean, Bale uses a lot of music, and he's using music in a way that later Protestants will go very decidedly against, and there's all sorts of questions there about which way he leans, and having his cake and eating it is something he does. I mean, what gets me is, if we go to the crux of what he does with, say, his biblical plays, is he's saying, right, let's go back to the Gospels. Let's strip away all the Catholic additions, the Virgin Mary, all these things. Let's go back to the original, the Gospel texts, and remove anything anyone's added. And then he adds some stuff of his own.
Yeah,
and it's like he doesn't notice the irony that is implicit in that action.
Well, one thing that is confusing me considerably is where he thinks the church stands in relation to a prince. He seems to say that it's completely subordinate, and then it's a strange position for a minister of religion to take. He is against immunity from civil punishment. He is against the state, but he appears not to be all that against the state taxing the church for state purposes which are nothing to do with religion. And then on the other hand, he says he seems to have some sympathy with the Cathars, who are put down by one of the papal bulls he talks about and crusades preached against them by St. Dominic, who is the new obsession du jour, it seems, by the time he gets to the end of the first half. I'm baffled as to where he does actually stand on all of these issues.
I think one of the problems with finding where we are with it is because we're getting a lot of people, satirically evil characters presenting things as, in their eyes, good things. It's actually sometimes I'm getting a little confused as to whether the play is presenting that good thing because it's by the bad people, so that must be a bad. And sometimes I think it's probably clearer in performance when they're more overtly, performed and make some decisions. But yeah, sometimes I'm going, is that for? Is it? Oh no, it's not for it. Is he? Yeah, and I get a bit confused.
Yeah, I agree. I'm finding this section of the play much more confusing and hard to keep track of than the section we covered yesterday.
Mm. Yeah, it's the details, isn't it, of how they, and it's also because everyone's changing names and costumes as well, but they're effectively a lot of the time they're effectively the same person, or they're just slightly shifting their status, and but also you've got the doublings, as we were talking about yesterday, where you've got quite fundamentally different characters, but they're being read by the same person. And of course, in this context, sometimes we get a bit confused as to who the hell you are, because, you know, we're just reading words. So yeah, I see an awful lot in this section where just a little bit of blue pencil would just make it much sharper. Actually, I think there's all sorts of great, because it's, you know, it's not a short play by any stretch of the imagination. I think it moves fast. You know, some plays do not move quickly, but you know, and feel longer than they are, but because of the pace, the dialogue seems to want to move at a fair old lick. So, as actors, you can all disagree with me. Okay, any additional thoughts before we go into, we're just going briefly into the opening of Act 2. We're not going desperately far. Give Lynsey a chance, who hasn't said anything yet. You'll get a chance to actually dive in a moment. So, Act 2, I say potentially, effectively, this is just carries straight on from the exiting of the Pope with his final lines of, you know, I will call a general council to ratify in like strength with the gospel, muhahaha, boo hiss. And so it might be that nobility and sedition come straight in afterwards, or there's been a bit of a break with the interpreter. But either way, sedition and nobility come in and say,
"It pitieth my heart to see the controversy that nowadays reigneth between the king and the clergy. All Canterbury monks are now the realm exiled, the priests and bishops continually reviled. The Cistercian monks are in such perplexity that out of England they reckon all to flee. I lament the chance as I would God should me save."
It is graciously said, God's blessing might ye have. Blessed is that man that will grant or condescend to help religion or holy church defend.
For their maintenance I have given lands full fair. I have disinherited many a lawful heir.
Well, it is your own good. God shall reward you for it, and in heaven full high for such good works ye shall sit.
Your habit showeth ye to be a man of religion.
Oh, I am no worse, sir. My name is Good Perfection.
I am the more glad to be acquainted with thee.
Ye show yourself here like a nobleman as ye be. I perceive right well your name is Nobility.
Your servant and Humphrey, of truth, father, I am he.
From Innocent the Pope I am come from Rome even now. 1,000 times I ween he commandeth him unto you, and sent you clean remission to take the church's part.
I thank his holiness. I shall do it with all my heart. If ye would take pains for hearing my confession, I would, out of hand, receive this clean remission.
Marry, with all my heart I will be full glad to do it.
Put on your stole then, and I pray you in God's name sit.
and here sit down, and nobility shall say Benedicite.
Benedicite.
Oh, Dominus, in nomine Domine Papae, Amen. Say forth your mind in God's name.
I have sinned against God. I acknowledge myself to blame. In the 7 deadly sins I have offended sore. God's 10 commandments I have broken evermore. My 5 bodily wits I have ungodly kept. The works of charity in manner I have outslept.
I trust ye believe, as Holy Church doth teach ye, and from the new learning ye are willing for to flee.
From the new learning, marry. God in heaven save me. I never loved it of a child, so mote I thee.
Ye can say your creed and your Latin Ave Maria.
Yea, and dirge also with 7 psalms and litany.
Do ye not believe in purgatory and holy blood?
Yes, and that good prayers shall stand my soul instead.
Well, then good enough, I warrant my soul for your.
Then execute on me the Holy Father's power.
Nay, while I have you here underneath Benedicite, in the Pope's behalf I must other things. In the Pope's behalf I must move other things to ye.
In the name of God, say here what you will to me.
Ye know that King John is a very wicked man, and Holy Church a continual adversary. The Pope willeth you to do the best he can to his subduing for his cruel tyranny. And for that purpose, this privilege graciously of clean remission he have sent you this time, clean to release you of all your sin and crime.
It is clean against the nature of nobility to subdue his king without God's authority. For his princely estate and power is of God. I would gladly do it, but I fear his rightful rod.
God's holy vicar gave me his whole authority. Lo, it is here, man, believe it. I beseech thee, or else thou wilt fall in danger of damnation.
Then I submit me to the Church's reformation.
I assoil thee here from king's obedience by the authority of the Pope's magnificence. Auctoritate Romanae Pontificus ego absolvo te, from all possessions given to the spirituality. In nomine Domine Pape. Amen. Keep all things secret, I pray you heartily.
Yes, that I will, sir, and come again hither shortly.
And he goes out. Just briefly going to pause there. We had the other day all the stuff about ear confession, the danger of ear confession, because it's going to lead to all sorts of opportunities for wrongdoing and sedition, basically. And lo, we have a demonstration of that concept. Is immediately here that this is used to introduce nobility in it. He thinks he's in a safe space, and he clearly isn't. And he's able to be turned, as it were. First fake name of the play as well. Actually, I don't think anyone's ever pretended to be somebody else yet. It's a bit of a thing for Tudor interludes to have people randomly change their names and pretend to be somebody else. So, Sedition, Stephen Langton is now pretending to be good perfection. Isn't that lovely? Any thoughts that crept out of that little sequence before we go to the final chunk?
Nobility's a very, what's the word I want? He's a very weak character, I think. Well, I don't mean weak in the sense that he's a weakling, but I don't know. He's just very easily swayed. But I suppose that's Bale's intention.
Yeah. It's that thing when he's talking about the new learning. I never trust every wasn't with me and Nanny, so I don't recognize it.
Yeah.
And Sedition's being his usual seditious self. I mean, I think he's very much picking up the reins. The vices are all sort of probably G'd up from the service they've just had, so they're in a good place, perhaps.
What I also find interesting about that little scene is just this tension between the authority of the Pope and the authority of the King, and which way, which do you give precedence to?
Yes, I mean it's a debate that they've been having a few times. Have we just lost Lynsey?
Yes.
The moment she's about to speak.
Oh no!
Oh no!
Hopefully she will come back.
I was going to say she's lost
back.
it. It's lost the will.
I was just worried. Your cue was about to appear, and it was just you'd gone.
Sorry, I think I've got the East Anglia internet issue.
Yeah. Okay. Any additional thoughts before we give Lynsey a chance before her internet goes down?
No.
Okay. In that case, here enter clergy and civil order together, and sedition shall go up and down a pretty while.
Is not your fatherhood Archbishop of Canterbury?
I am Stephen Langton. Why make ye here inquiry?
And kneel down, and they both say together,
We
are right Welcome to the same region.
Truly.
Stand up, I pray you. I trow thou art the clergy.
I am the same, sir, and this is civil order.
If a man might ask you, what make you in this border?
I heard tell yesterday, ye may come into the land. I thought for to see you, some news to understand.
Oh, in faith thou art welcome. Is civil order thy friend?
He is a good man, and beareth the church good mind.
Right, sorry I am of the great controversy between him and the king, if I might it remedy.
Oh, well, civil order, for thy good will, gramercy, that matter will be of another fashion shortly. First, to begin with, we shall interdict the land.
Marry, God forbid we should be in such bond. But who shall do it? I pray you heartily.
Pandolphus and I. We have it in our legacy. He went to the king for that cause yesterday, and I will follow so fast as ever I may. Lo, here is the bull of mine authority.
I pray God to save the Pope's holy majesty.
Sit down on your knees, and you shall have the absolution, a pena et culpa with 1,000 days of pardon. Here is first a bone of the blessed Trinity, a dram of the turd of sweet Barnaby. Here is a feather of good St. Michael's wing, a tooth of St. Twide, a piece of David's harp string, a louse of St. Francis in this same crimson silk, the scab of St. Job, a nail of Adam's toe, a maggot of Moses with a fart of St. Fandigo. Here is a fig leaf and a grape of Noah's vineyard, a bead of St. Bly with a bracelet of a bearwood, the devil that was hatched in Master John Sean's boot, that the tree of Jesse did pluck up by the root. Here is the latchet of sweet St. Thomas's shoe, a rib of St. Raybart with a buckle bone of a Jew. Here is a joint of Darvel Gathrion, besides the bones of Rex many one. In nomine Domine Pape Amen. Arise now like men and stand upon your feet, for ye have caught and holy in a blessed heat. Ye are now as clean as that day you were born, and like to have increase of children, cattle, and corn.
Children, he can have none, for he is not of that load.
Oh, tush! Though we have none at home, he may have some abroad. Now, clergy, my friend, this thou must do for the Pope and for Holy Church. Thou must men's conscience grope, and as thou feelest them so cause them for to work, let them show King John no more favour than a Turk. Everywhere stir them to make an insurrection.
All that shall I do. And to provoke them more, this interdiction I will lament very sore in all my preachings, and say, through his occasion, all we are under the danger of damnation. And this will move people to help to put him down, or else compel him to give up sceptre and crown. Yea, and that will make those kings that shall succeed of the Holy Church to stand evermore in dread. And besides all this, the church doors I will upseal, and close up the bells that they ring never a peal. I will spear up the chalice, Christmas tree, cross and all, that mass they shall have none, baptism nor burial. And this I know well will make the people mad.
Marry, that it will, such sons he never had. And what wilt thou do for Holy Church civil order?
For the clergy's sake, I will in every border provoke the great men to take the commons part. With cautels of the law, I will so tickle their heart, they shall think all good that they shall pass upon. And so shall we come to our full intent anon, for if the church thrive, then do we lawyers thrive. And if they decay, our wealth is not alive. Therefore, we must help your state, masters, to uphold, or else our profits will catch a winter cold. I never knew lawyer which had any crafty learning that ever escaped you without a plenteous living. Therefore we may not leave holy churches quarrel, but ever help it, for their fall is our peril.
God's blessings have ye. This gear then will work, I trust.
Or else some of us are like to lie in the dust.
Let us all avoid by the mass, the king cometh here.
I would hide myself for a time, if I was where.
Go we hence apart, for I have spied a corner.
And they all go out before the re-entrance of King John, but that's as far as we're going to get today. I've already mentioned John Hayward once this session, but I think it absolutely vital that I mentioned that the whole various holy relics sequence is so ripped off from I mean, to be fair, John Hayward's ripped it off from other people, but you know, that is a very common bit, and if you'd like to hear a longer exposition on terrible relics, then go to the Pardon and the Friar on the podcast, or the 4 Ps, because John Hayward thought it was so funny he used it twice as well. So that section of the text here is also extended, so it's another one of those lists where they've gone, you know what, we can put a few more relics in. But some of those are very familiar. I don't think I've come across the fart of Saint Fandingo before. It might have been something similar. The hucklebone of a Jew we have had before somewhere else, so that does actually ring a bell.
Well, what about a dram of the turd of sweet St. Barnaby?
Bits of that sound familiar, but I don't think it went as far as dram of a turd.
Yeah.
I can have a quick look, actually. I've got the book things there. So, yeah, it's interesting how civil order is drawn into this. Lynsey, you weren't here the other day for the first appearance of civil order. How did you find civil order from what scanty evidence you had?
Well, scanty evidence is that he really doesn't take a lot of persuading. I mean, he probably would have, you know, been quite happy after the dram of the turd of sweet St. Barnaby. He didn't really need all of the other marvelous array of holy relics to be convinced. But yeah, it's interesting that he does say, you know, kind of at the first, oh well, you can't mean children, increase of children for him because he's a member of the clergy. Is that like a test?
I love Sedition's response to that. You know, you may have none at home, but you have some abroad.
Oh yeah, wondering if Alison is involved again at this stage. Or... but yes, I mean, it's very clear. Civil order knows exactly who he needs to keep sweet, in order to keep his own pockets lined. You know.
Yeah, so we've got another set of people who are being sort of quietly corrupted once again. So we had nobility in Sedition first, and then as clergy and civil order, and obviously clergy to some degree is already on the side of Sedition. We got the impression from earlier. Didn't need is already sort of they can tag team a bit.
Really is very dangerous stuff, isn't it? Because everybody is seen to accommodate corruption by their complacency. And if he's got one thing, it seems to say, I mean, he hasn't got a John Everyman character, but what he seems to be saying is every individual can make up their own mind that this bunch of sods are completely rotten, but we've just assumed that civil order and the way the laws are arranged and the presence of bishops and so on is just perfectly normal. And in point of fact, it's shutting us out of heaven. It's very radical lollardy, more or less.
Yes, no one can ever accuse Bale of being, sitting on the fence, ever. He doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. So yes, we're about halfway through the text. Oddly enough, first half is actually shorter than the second because I think it's because he kept adding bits to the second half. So for those who've been in the room for the first session as well, let's start with you in terms of how are you feeling, the overall shape of things, how are you feeling as a play? Usual question of what does one do with a play like this? Before we go to those who are new to this play so far. Anyone want to jump in? Tumbleweed passes. Very much into final thoughts as well. So if you've anything you'd like to leap in with.
I mean, I don't particularly have anything intelligent to say. I obviously didn't do the first half of the play, but I'm quite happy to jump in and kind of. It's weird reading this in isolation because again, it reminds me of Magnificence. That there's so much build up to Magnificence coming on that I haven't even encountered King John as a character in this entire kind of session, and it's almost like it's been two skits about kind of sending up the Catholic Church and doing a parody of the Catholic Mass, which is entertaining enough in and of itself, but sort of feels like it sort of seems to be picking up traction now. Just kind of sucked in clergy and civil order, and it's sort of building up towards something. I mean, my mind boggles at something that's 3 hours long, because in my wide experiences of modern audiences, getting them to sit the hell down for 45 minutes each way is a struggle these days. So were I putting this in front of a modern audience and having to think about what they needed, I would probably want to cut it personally. And I wonder as well whether, like you were saying, a lot of it may be more clear in terms of the physical presentation of it. Like, I sort of love the circus element of bearing them on his shoulders, and then, if you don't put me down, Jenny, I'll shit all over you, and then the joy, everyone joined in a lovely song, and then maybe when you have that repeated with the whole sort of rubbishy relic thing, I think you'd have to find something new to do with it. I don't think you could just repeat the earlier Catholic Mass thing that you'd had, however successful that was as a skit. You'd have to do something different rather than just someone kneeling and being given a cod absolution.
It's interesting you mentioning Magnificence. I think, yes, you're right. Dramaturgically, it's exactly the same problem, actually. Last session, we dealt with the setup. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily overstaying its welcome, but, there's an awful lot of building up to interdiction and excommunication and getting back to John coming back in the room and something else therefore happening. And there is very much a sense that the plot is now going to start pushing forward. That's me speaking with some knowledge of where it's going. And I think that's true. If there's a hurdle dramaturgically, we've just covered quite a lot of it. There's good material there. Within its logics as a play, but there's also we've gone through the blue pencil area where trimming feels necessary.
And again, I don't know whether that's a modern. I mean, I can only speak from my own experience, but a modern audience issue that, in general, I mean, I sound about 1,000 years old talking about it, but the attention spans are shorter. It would be so interesting to kind of, be at a performance of this in that time and see how much attention, that there is focused on different things. Because to me, it's definitely a modern problem that, an hour each way these days is too much for a lot of people.
Well, it's the other thing is it's not as explosive now. I mean, it's a bit unpleasant because we're going, well, we kind of shouldn't be quite so horrible about religion, but for then, I mean, this is dynamite. literal dynamite. People will get more than a little miffed by this kind of material being presented in front of them, or on the other side, just elated that it's happened. And there's a real question of what that audience response would be like, depending on where it's performed. I mean, I wouldn't want to be the actor in this company, regardless of my position on the theology. I would not want to be going around the country performing this.
Mm-hmm.
Terrifying.
It's sort of like the Jerry Springer the opera of its day in terms of kind of sort of polarizing people.
That actually occurred to me earlier, Jerry Springer, for some reason. It was like a couple of things. When Robert was talking about this, when we were doing Three Laws, I was kind of expecting to enjoy this one more. I actually prefer Three Laws, which is strange because I didn't think I would. When I was doing the relics, I sort of got visions of this massive bag and things that squirt and just annoying, just really getting members of the audience unexpectedly. Bit London Dungeon. Don't know why. I think it's either going to be very visual it's going to be very visual and with an element of that sort of shock. But yes, there was that. But we forgot to say this earlier. The interpreter's speech, it was very interesting hearing what was being said afterwards, because when I was reading it, I was thinking my modern instinct was to be very cynical and very, oh, isn't this funny? He thinks, yeah, right. King John was nothing of that sort. But actually, I hadn't quite worked out that actually, no, it was more serious than, it was much more about him than it was being cynical about him. But yeah, no, really interesting parts, Sedition.
It was just occurring to me just now when I was talking about, I wouldn't want to be in an acting company which is, doing a play which is potentially offending a major religion. And it occurs to me, I'm talking to Keith, who I wrote a play where he got to be on stage, potentially interpreted as an assault on a major religion. So, Keith, speaking as an actor, do you feel any empathetic reaction to this, actually, from that point of view?
Well, certainly one gets the feeling that this play could easily upset everybody. About the one thing he seems to accept is that the mass is a good thing. I'm not quite sure how much longer he's going to go on believing that. It's very revolutionary stuff. It's going to annoy and frighten a lot of people. You can't trust the law. The king's a completely rudderless ship being blown from side to side. The only thing you've got is your own personal relationship with God, and you haven't yet seen a common or garden human being apart from the king. And it is, I agree with the general feeling in the room, it feels as if it's running into the sand rather in the way that Three Laws might not. I mean, Three Laws, the title is so explanatory that you almost know what's coming. I think the problem with this might not be modern attention spans. It might just be the technical issues relating to the Catholic Church and its mechanisms are simply completely outwit the knowledge of most of us. I mean, I've been sitting here listening to some of this stuff. I'm caught up in some of it, frantically looking it up because I no longer remember it. And I just thought, yeah, you get seriously out of your depth. And the temptation would be in presenting it, and I hope Lynsey will forgive me for this, that you finish up with a lot of pointless running about, rather like certain areas of the RSC that I think. And adding slapstick and burlesque without actually eliminating the text at all.
Yes, there is a problem that the audience who would understand it is the audience who would hate it. Which, of course, is sort of Bale's point, but it's sort of you sort of get caught in an interesting trap, because I wouldn't want to be that person putting on that to do that, because I'm not Bale. Lynsey, so coming in at this late stage, and how have you found any final thoughts?
Yeah, it's very interesting, just sort of picking up from what you were just saying. I suddenly kind of Dario Fo flashed into my brain for some reason, and I just sort of was thinking of anarchy with a lot of commedia and a lot of like with all the relics. I was thinking of a magician's coat with open the coat and pulling out all the stuff and all of that kind of thing. And I just but it makes me ask the question, who is the audience? If the people who would understand what he was saying would be offended by it, then who was the audience? And the length of it and the need to cut it for our time, absolutely yes. But I don't know enough about how and to whom it was performed and where it was performed. Were people constantly coming in and out all of the time? So therefore the sort of rather regular plot updates and recaps and casting forwards was because just nobody was actually sitting there for the length of one of these first acts, because people were just coming and going all the time. So I don't, these are questions I would have, who is the audience?
And if it's a touring propaganda vehicle, then of course it might not, where it's performing and the kind of audience would potentially be very different each time. Bale was carrying this around for years, and we can assume that he was doing a lot more performances of this at other times, if he could get away with it, because he was clearly really keen. So it could be that there's room for the audience to escape, and there could be that there isn't. And the ability to stand and listen to someone talking for a very long time was much more practiced in early modern times, because the sermons and the services could go on for a very long time, so that people were used to that. Doesn't mean they still weren't bored. It just meant they were just practiced. But it's a really good point.
And would he, let's say it was performed in front of one audience, and he thinks, oh well, I don't have to have the interpreter speech to this audience because they're keeping up, or something like that. I mean, how flexible a text would it have been based on who the audience was, how attentive they were, all of these are all questions, I think.
No, it's a great questions. Francis, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I'm coming at this as somebody who was raised as a Catholic, although I'm not practicing now, and it sort of plays into my own ambivalent feelings about the Catholic Church. I mean, some of his targets, like the relics and the ridiculous cult surrounding the Pope, and the over-elaborate ceremonies of the Catholic Church. I mean, it's all dead on, but just the same, the virulence of it is eye-opening. It really is. So, and I wonder, if you did stage this play today, how modern audiences would react to it. How would Catholics today watching this react to it?
I mean, it's interesting. A lot of the easy targets that he's doing there, the relics, etc., is stuff that Catholics themselves are already, and there's a long tradition, going back hundreds of years of these excessives, but then added to co-opting essentially criticism that already exists, and then larding it on with the vitriol and the bile of Bale that he has. It's fascinating. Jitka, any final thoughts?
For me, the play started as quite, intellectual debate would be way too much to say, but quite, lofty in ideas, and it's getting more and more physical and dependent on props. And really, more and more, the Pope is coming up as a sort of director, not, as I said, not only saying dissimulation, you just speak too much, but even saying, I will instruct God to do this and that and that and that. But I wonder whether the way to stage this would be to emphasize that this is, well, partly about religion, but it's also about worldview and who claims to be right. And I think there would be ways to maybe try some taking into a political context where those sort of clashes that we experience these days might provide some sort of a parallel to the sort of clashes they were having back then. So I think just playing the religious tune wouldn't, unless you turn it into farce, it wouldn't really resonate with the anxieties of the period, which were absolutely massive. I find it fascinating about this period that you have people who were, asked to convert, knowing their parents were sort of born into the wrong religion, and you have got, huge wounds in the society with, graveyards just dismantled, and so there's humor in this, and there's also a lot of trauma underneath. Which I don't think we detect unless we read the context of it.
Yeah, and I think that's something that really, we're talking about three laws before as well. It's something where we got to find a way of getting the context in. Otherwise, we're just performing hate speech, and we're really not in the business to do that. We've got to find a way of finding something with this more than just that, and the trauma of the time, and what this thing is doing to audiences. Can we address that in some way and raise that question? It's with this and three laws. I'm very much looking at this. There's material here that needs to be shaped into something for today, rather than saying we just put on King John or we just put them on, because I don't think that's really the way forward in the way that his three biblical plays are mostly doable, just with occasional caveats and maybe the odd line cut, that they sort of stand up, mostly it's occasional moments. Right. Any final thoughts from everyone? Otherwise, I'm going to close the session. We lost Keith. He has a thing that needs sorting, according to the chat. I'd just like to thank everyone for helping us get further on into John Bale's King John. Such a tongue twister. We will be finishing this hopefully next week, if not at some point in the future. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Well, thank you.
Bye.